Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. It's not easy tracking down a private eye like Maurice Hicks, but he's had some incredible adventures that he shares with us in his book, Looking for Trouble. So you're a busy guy, huh?
Yes, I am. But I also have another job, and so I'm in a government facility. So.
Oh, you're in Maryland. Everybody's in a government facility, right?
Yes.
What do you do?
That's for sure. Yeah, work for the State Department as an investigations case manager.
Oh, and then on the side?
Yeah, PI work. Yes.
People come to you and say, I think my wife is cheating, that kind of stuff?
I used to get a lot of that, not so much anymore.
What made you start writing, or have you always been a writer?
Years ago, I wrote a chapter in a police investigation book many years ago on undercover operations and drug stuff. But I've always had a passion for writing, even when I was in junior high school and high school. I had a passion for writing. I got selected by my English teacher to write a letter to the president when I was in the 10th grade.
Oh.
Yes.
So what made you write this, Looking for Trouble?
Two things. First of all, I've been teaching at University of Maryland Global Campus for 22 years, and I use a lot of my actual cases as case studies for my students. And I wouldn't tell them until the end it was actually a case that I had. They thought it was just some abstract case, and then they would say to me, "Oh my God, this will make a great book." And I heard that so many times that I finally decided to go ahead and write the book. And then the one other thing, as I was traveling across the U.S. over the years, I inadvertently run into people who asked me what I did for a living, and I would tell them in law enforcement. And they would ask me, tell me about your greatest case, your most interesting case. And I would tell them, and they would say the same thing. Oh my God, this would make a great book.
So tell me about your book.
The book basically covers 10 years of my 20 in law enforcement. And it runs down my transformation from a rookie police officer to a veteran detective. And along the way, I run into a person who aspires and eventually becomes a drug kingpin. And I had run-ins with him when I'm a rookie officer. And as I ascend to become a detective, he ascends to become a kingpin. So I set off on this 10-year journey to try to bring him to justice. And he's suspected of about 12 murders. So he ascends. I go from patrol to major narcotics to homicide, and eventually to the FBI in the relentless pursuit of trying to catch this kingpin who's basically wreaking havoc in this one community that I used to patrol as a patrol officer.
Was it a community in Baltimore?
Initially, it was in Baltimore, and then eventually this kingpin was in Prince George's County, Maryland, which is a D.C. suburb right near Washington, D.C.
I mean, how frustrating must it be to see this guy rising through the ranks and there's nothing you can do? I mean, you're doing your job, but how come it took you 10 years?
Yes, because one thing is because he's a very clever criminal. And the second thing, he had the best lawyers money could buy.
Oh.
And for him, with each acquittal comes enormous insight into the loopholes in the criminal justice system. And then, he was operating in multiple jurisdictions, so there's a lack of communication between law enforcement agencies. So a lot of those things added to the frustration. And then for me, there was even more frustration because a lot of people that he was suspected of killing were people that I knew, that I had, run into as a patrol officer and, ran into them, but talked to them, got to know them, and their families, and it was just heartbreaking, to see they were getting, these young men were getting killed at such a young age.
I'm sure you're familiar with The Wire, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, how true to life is that?
Very close to reality, other than the area that I forgot what they called the area they had in the wire where it was like lawlessness. They could pretty much operate. But other than that, it's pretty much on point. You know, capturing the drug culture. It's pretty much on point. The subculture and police work. You know, the rivalry between different drug dealers and things like that.
I mean, it was so hard to watch that at times because the kids,
Yes.
the teachers who wanted to help,
Mhm.
these kids, and they would go home and their parents were doing drugs and they had no support system whatsoever. And there was no way, it was like there was no way to save them. And they ended up, they would start out as kids and they would have hopes and dreams. And the next thing they're doing heroin like everybody else,
Absolutely. And I know firsthand because I grew up in Baltimore, you know, where I lived on Park Heights Avenue, they had a shooting gallery right across the street from where I live. I used to watch people shoot up heroin practically every day, and go on crime sprees. So I know firsthand the sense of hopelessness and, feeling like you're living under siege, especially as a child, because a lot of this, I remember seeing it as early as 11 years old.
And you were somehow able to escape.
Yes, I felt really blessed, and that's really what pushed me in my destiny. So watching these guys shooting up heroin, every day I had to come out and see that, and people doing what they call the nickname they call is the dope fiend lean, bent all over and having needles stuck in their arms asleep, things like that. It was just, it's just horrific for a child to see, and that's really what kind of propelled me into law enforcement. Seeing, growing up, seeing that, and later becoming a narcotics detective.
What are we doing wrong? Why did it take you 10 years to catch a drug kingpin?
Well, one of the things that's frustrating about neighborhoods, and I talk about this in the book, is that people are afraid to provide information to the police. And they're afraid for their safety, and they also, a lot of them don't have confidence that the police will do anything. And that was my frustration, growing up. A lot of people just didn't call the police. All kinds of crime, robbery, burglary, they just didn't call the police. They just had no confidence in the police.
Was there a reason for that? I mean, how many times in The Wire, again, anybody who's listening to us right now, Google The Wire. It's a great series.
Absolutely.
But, and it's so real life, but it does happen where, these kids would, the police would say they would protect them. And then ultimately they couldn't protect them. The gang members or whoever got to them, found out they were talking to the cops or whatever, best friends were killed. It's like a cycle you can't break.
Yes, because there's nothing more sacred than family. So you don't not only have to worry about your own personal safety, you have to worry about your family's personal safety. There's no officer going to be sitting in front of your house for the next couple of years guarding you, and people just fall. They're going to fall prey to to the violence. So it's really no protection for people.
So your book, takes us through the trials of trying to find this guy. Were you ever able to succeed, or do we have to read the book to find out?
You have to read the book to find out that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is just so frustrating, especially when you get to know people in the community. You get to know these young men and young women, and it's frustrating as an officer who wants to make a difference. Trying to secure cooperation. But again, you have to worry about if they cooperate, what's going to happen to the witness, So, and I deal with a lot of that in the book where I have people who I will have to worry about them getting killed.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like these, yeah. And were you able to protect them?
Yes, I was able to protect them. Some we were, and other ones we weren't. Some people actually died. Yeah, some people actually died, and it's particularly when people decide they're not going to cooperate and they're part of the organization, and because they are in a position to provide information, they'll kill them anyway because they won't give an opportunity for them to testify. They'll just kill them.
Oh my gosh! And we're talking kids, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't even wrap my head around what that must be like.
Yeah.
I don't know how you keep you keep yourself together. you know?
Yes, and that's another thing that I try to describe in the book is just the impact, of having the enormous responsibility of bringing these violent offenders to justice. It's a lot of pressure. Um, one mistake, one technicality, if you don't get something right legally, you can lose the case, and people, their families are dependent on you to bring these people to justice. And like I say, we're officers and detectives. We're not lawyers, so we're making the best judgment we can sometimes, and just making a split-second decision about, how to handle a case.
Amazing. So, are you going to keep writing? It sounds like you have a wealth
Oh,
of information to
yes,
draw on.
yes, I've already started my second book.
Is it an extension of this book or is it completely different?
No, it's an extension of this book.
Okay, so this book doesn't end here.
Correct. So I'll
Oh,
pick
so
up the.
you may not even you may not find this guy by the end of this book.
Yeah, well, I'll leave that for the reader to find out.
Okay.
Yes,
All
without a
right.
doubt, without a doubt.
Now, are you out talking about your book?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Mainly through word of mouth, through some of my former colleagues in the police department, and I'm going to be featured in a Security magazine here in June. It was the international magazine.
That's great.
Yes,
And I would think that your book could be very helpful.
I think so. You really get a sense of how crime impacts people in the community. You know, um, so I try to do a good job of describing not only what the victims are going through, the witnesses, the officers, the detectives, the families, just to get an idea of the terror, that these people are experiencing, having to go through the criminal justice, having to deal with the criminal justice system and all its
Yeah,
flaws.
it's never going to be without flaws, is it?
No, not at all. And there's so many cases in the system, and prosecutors have to make a decision on which ones they're going to actually bring to trial, which ones they can, actually make in court. So a lot of cases are going to go by the wayside or be pled out.
That's got to be frustrating for you.
Absolutely. Another thing about the book, it shows how the criminal justice system is a revolving door for many people, and not just people committing misdemeanors, but people also committing felonies. It's a revolving door, and they're getting out, committing other crimes.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot in New York, in New York City. People get arrested, and by the time the officer's off duty, they're out again.
Yes, yes,
It's not just New York, right? It's going on all over the place.
yeah, this is correct. And then the other thing is there's so much of a focus on violent crime. A lot of property crimes will fall by the wayside. Like property crimes are very difficult to prosecute them because there's so many violent offenders out there. So people are losing property, and in those cases, fall, like I say, fall by the wayside and not probably investigated, if investigated at all.
Wow. All right. So I think it's interesting. The name of your book, Looking for Trouble,
Yes.
and doing something about it.
Well, the interesting thing is that as I grew up in Baltimore, I spent my entire life trying to avoid trouble. And then I joined the police department and I become a magnet for trouble.
Yeah, right.
It's like I can't, no matter where I go, I can't get away from finding trouble. And I developed a knack for it. And it's interesting because from a person that's pretty much a studious nerd to a person going after serial rapists and drug kingpins and smugglers, like the last thing you would expect. But as fate had it, that ended up being my
Right.
calling in life.
How did you survive living in that environment? Did you have a good family support system?
Yes, first of all, it was a blessing. I give honor to God for that.
Right.
But I'm also blessed that I had a variety of aunts and uncles that were always pouring into me. Teachers, they had a significant impact. And for me, Sunday school really, the information and Sunday school teachers always give me words of encouragement and let me know, just how difficult life can be without an education. And if I fall prey to crime, I just feel very blessed. And I know that I could have easily fallen by the wayside like many other people that I grew up with. Many of them were killed like before they were even 16 years old.
Mm. I
Yeah.
can't even imagine. Well, you were well worth the wait, Maurice Hicks. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated.
You have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Shahriar Jahanian came to the U.S. from Iran in 1978, got his Ph.D. in mechanical engineering, and was a college professor for 30 years. He had his own company, finally retired, and started writing philosophy books. But this book, The Whale Suicide, is different. It's a true story based on the diary of his friend Parviz.
What happened was at the time I was a college professor in Fresno State. And he came to the United States because one of his friends was a PhD student at Penn State. And he apparently found Altoona, Pennsylvania to be cheaper. He went there, but he couldn't find a job, and he had a daughter. And he contacted me. I told him, hey, why don't you come to California? There are more opportunity in California than Altoona, Pennsylvania,
For sure.
naturally. Yeah. And then he came to Fresno, and I helped him to find a job. And unfortunately, he got very sick. And one day I received a phone call that he's in the heart hospital because he had a stroke or heart attack, and that was his second. And I went to visit him. He was in ICU, and he was dying there. He was in a deathbed, and he told me that in his home office, if I go to his desk, and in such a drawer, I found his diary, and he wanted me to read it and turn it to a book. And went and I got his diary. And 5 days after that, I was told that he died.
Ah.
And I cremated him because he didn't have anybody else in here. And in the book, I had explained. So my inspiration for writing the book was really the fact that he wanted me to write it. And when I read his diary, at the same time, it was extremely sad. It was kind of fascinating. It was very appealing to me. And when I started reading his diary, it kind of explained why revolution in Iran happened. When we were in Iran during the Shah's regime, the situation was very good, in my opinion. We were students. We were going to the best university in the country. It's like somebody go to Stanford or to MIT. We didn't have to pay tuition. Tuition was free. Uh, our lunch was, I would say, best lunch. The price of that was 1/10 of same lunch if we go to a restaurant outside. Even in the United States, you can't find something like that. The only thing which we had to do, we had to sign that we will give twice the time that we use this kind of benefit, work for the country.
Okay.
You work any place that you find a job in your country. That's the only thing we had to sign.
Okay.
And the country was anywhere you would go, they would respect you as an Iranian. The Iranian army was fifth in the world. Iraq would never dare to attack us. And why people went and had a revolution? And eventually in the book says what happened to this guy. He was placed in the jail. Now, the reason I call it a whale suicide is because I believe this is exactly like a whale suicide. I don't know if you know it or not. Whales once in a while in a group, they go to the shore and they commit suicide.
Okay.
Nobody knows exactly why they do that. There are some theories, but there is not a definite theory that why they did that. I believe the Iranian Revolution is like that. The people commit suicide actually, because after the revolution, now we see that. I give you one example. During the Shah's regime, he would give free food to the kids. During the breaks, the kids who were in the junior high and high school, they would get pistache, they would get milk. They would get some lunch, best lunch would given to them free of charge, because he believed that these kids need good nutrition to be able to study. But
Okay.
right now you can find the kids at this era, and this is a country which is sitting on oil. These kids, their parents from the, because they are below poverty, they sell their own kid. And some people, they buy them and they force them in a cold weather to wear some a little clothes and shake and sell flour. And people who buy flour feel sorry for them and buy. But why during, after 40 years, we see the kids who at one time would get so much pistache that they wouldn't eat it, and they would sit there and play it as a marble, use that as a marble, because there were too many food, too much food, too much nutrition for them. But right now, they don't find even one meal a day, that they have to go and in cold weather wear a little clothes, sell flour. And the reason they wear a little clothes is because people feel sorry for them. Why people sell their own kids? What happened? So
Right.
that's a real suicide. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I
And
do.
in this story, actually, it explained why he was attracted to communists. He was from Communist Party, but during the revolution, the communists and religious became united, and they went against the Shah. What happened? How Communist Party advertised to attract these people while they were living in a heaven. You know, Andrew Scott Cooper, I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, wrote a book called It Follow Heaven. And exactly this is what happened. Then it talks about the story of this guy, that when he sees that the regime changed, this is not what they were thinking of. So he and some of his friends who were communists or things like that, and including his wife, they go to a home, and they take they have gun and everything to fight against the government.
Mm.
Some kind of guerrilla type of gathering. I don't know what you call that, but there are groups which they do that, and their house is attacked by the police.
Okay.
And the detail of that is, at the same time, it is sad. It represents what really happened
Right.
there. And they take him, and they take him to the event prison, the male event prison, and his wife to the female event prison. And he was tortured there. He was put in the solitary confinement, and there was a jail which is worse than solitary confinement, which they call it grave. And the way it is, like, imagine a room which is, I would say, 10 feet by 12 feet.
Mm.
They put some boxes there, but you can just sit. You cannot even lay down.
Oh.
And this way they can put 10 or 12 people in there. And even when they want to go to bathroom, they can't. They come every 3 hours and say, bathroom time, whether you need to go or not.
Oh
If
God.
before that you need to go to bathroom, you have to hold it. And this is a terrible situation. And they give you some foods that maybe there are bugs there or there, and either you eat it or not.
Oh.
And he was tortured, and he was told that he has to have forced confession. That means he says something which he even didn't do it.
Right.
And eventually, I tell you two scenes from this book, but the rest, I don't want to tell you the entire
Okay.
story, because, then nobody going to buy the book,
Right.
quite frankly. And then he come and say, hey, I'm ready to go to TV and tell whatever you tell me. But you torture me so much. I've gum disease. I have lots of problem. I need to be treated. And they say we give you sick vacation for 2 weeks, because in the hospital, in that hospital, in the jail, they don't have the facility. but under one condition. As a collateral that you come back, you have to put your house and land, and your father has to take your place.
Oh my
So
goodness.
father has to come to jail, so you come back.
Oh.
And he has two kids, a son, which is 5 years old, and a daughter, which is 3 years old. And the day the father wants to take his place, hug his son, and the father goes through the ultimate sacrifice, tell in his son's ear, my son, I lived my life. I'm 65, 70 years old. Take your kid's hand and never look back. We talked with a smuggler who trafficked people out of the country, and go with him, and we paid him and everything, and don't think about me. Don't worry about me. So his father, actually, that's the ultimate sacrifice to me.
Yeah.
And he decided to do that. His mother even says that he's a kind of, how should I say it, kind of is in dilemma that he has to do it or not. Mother
Right.
convinced him, father voluntarily agree to take your place and even give his life for your life and your children's life. Don't hesitate, take it and go.
Right.
And then the wife come visit him there from jail. They let him to visit him, and she tells what happened to her, which is, you got to read the book, which is a bit sad about that. And then she smuggled out of country. Through his escape, his son get killed. So eventually found out his father was hanged, his wife was hanged, his son was killed, and he come to United States.
Oh my God.
He goes through lots of things, but he filed for it. He goes to, I believe, in Pakistan, and in Pakistan, he goes to the capital of Pakistan and filed for asylum to the United States.
Right.
And asylum is given, and he come to United States, but he had to fight with his memory when he was in jail, and what kind of misery and pain he went through when he came to US, what happened, and his story of is you will find it very fascinating what happened to him. And the story actually is not story of Parviz. It's story of hundreds of Parviz.
Yeah.
This story represents a story how a family was ruined because of one mistake. So this book really, in a terms of a story of one person who represent lots of people, explain why revolution happened to Iran, why people who had everything, like whales, went and committed suicide. I hope that...
Wow, you got some powerful stuff going on there.
I am hoping that one day it turn to movie. I know it's a big dream, but
well, yeah.
Tell Hollywood people about that.
It's kind of ironic the way you met this guy, and then he ends up giving you access to his diary. I mean, it's a great story.
Yeah, the reason he gave the right to his diary, because he himself knew that he was very sick and he may die.
Right.
He didn't want his diary just to go to grave and nobody knows about that. And he wanted everybody to know about that. I told people that not necessarily, I know people want to see happy ending, but sometimes the real life, we don't have a happy ending in the real life. Life may not be fair, but that's life.
It is.
You know why?
It is.
I don't know.
It is. That's correct. That is life. But I guess if there's a happy ending, quote unquote, it's that this man found you and this man trusted you to get his story out. And you did that. You succeeded in getting his story down on paper for the rest of the world to see. And that's pretty amazing. That's a pretty awesome thing that you've done. And
Okay.
that is the end of the story, is that you managed to accomplish this. This couldn't have been easy. It was written in Farsi, right?
Yeah, it was written in
Oh my
Farsi.
God.
But
I can't even
Alice, I have to tell you the truth. 80%, 90% was exactly what he put it in his diary. I translated in English, and I try very hard to write it in good English so people enjoy when they're reading. The Page Publishing edited for me. I should say the editor in Page Publishing did a very good job to read it and edit it and maybe enhance the writing here and there. So that's what basically I have.
What an interesting book you have right here. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. And if you know a director in Hollywood,
Okay.
just keep in mind.
All right.
You know.
I'll call you when when you're up for the Academy Award. All right.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much.
You take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Alexander Von Nett has published 2 books, but Ocean Odyssey, the Amalgamated States Military, is his first under the ReaderHouse umbrella. It's good to have you, Alex. So, sounds like frustration was pretty much your motivation.
A lot of things. I have to say that my own experiences, I was really frustrated with a lot of the stuff that I was seeing on TV or in the movies. Just a lot of garbage. A lot of stuff has been censored today. I mean, not as much on cable TV, but most of it on the films have been censored heavily for the foreign market, and they're not good movies at all. And they're not meant to offend anybody, and they're not good films. And they're not. It's just pretty bad material, and it's been a really long time of this. So I just decided to write my own stuff. And this one, I had an idea about World War II in veterans of World War II, and I heard really amazing adventure stories about soldiers who served in different militaries in the same war. So I was very interested in that, and I just kind of figured I think to myself, what would I do in that situation? And so I kind of placed. I came up with a science fiction version. I mixed real history and real, try to describe the combat as accurately as I could. I try to make all my stories realistic, but it was something I mixed with the fantasy.
So what happens in your book?
It's an adventure story, a science fiction story. It's about a German sailor, submariner, who's a captain of a U-boat. And there's some action in the beginning, and then later on in the war, he gets captured. He's sent to the U.S. as a POW.
Okay.
And he's at a work camp in Arizona. And the Marines are in need of more troops because there's heavy losses in the island hopping campaign. So they basically told him, to either join the Marines or go to prison. And so he decided to join the Marines in his pursuit of becoming a U.S. citizen and getting away from where he came from. And so he goes on that adventure, and a lot of hardships in the Marines, and goes on the Battle of Bougainville. Saipan is another one to bring up, and so and that's where the sci-fi comes in. He's captured by an otherworldly figure after a battle, and he's basically missing in action the rest of the time, and he finds himself in an underworld, undersea kingdom, and he's basically frozen by these very powerful mystical creatures. And he's waking up 1,000 years later into the far future, and then basically he's kind of a protagonist, a person that is looked upon to help rebuild a damaged future, like an apocalyptic future, where people are trying to rebuild their civilization and their country, and he's basically somebody that came from the past that tells them, guides them the right way. And that's kind of the idea. It's about rebuilding a civilization, rebuilding.
And he's able to bring some real life experience to that they have no knowledge of, right?
Right. So he has experience as a sailor and a Marine, and he brings that to them, and he's basically put in command at some point after he was somebody that was recovered and found and brought back, revived after being frozen. And then at first they obviously they don't have him as a as a member of their crew, but then he becomes one, and then he becomes a member of a leader in the command. And so he helps them fight the villains, and he's kind of in another worldly world, but it's very similar to the one that he knew. As the same Earth, same people, but like things that we consider like the Roman Colosseum as ancient, but they consider like the Washington Monument and the White House is ancient.
Right,
so
right.
That's how they look at it. And it's in kind of ruin and decay, and they're trying to rebuild this civilization. They have these records. They have a lot of records of what the past was, and people speak similar language, almost identical languages as we speak today. But there's basically he gives them a backstory and tells them what happens, what not to when you have a government and a society. What you try to avoid, and what happened in his country was really horrible. And he tries to explain that, and then he tries to explain there's hope in this, this new America that's being rebuilt, and this new military. So he's a submariner, and he's also he gets to lead the Marines that they bring on board, and it's a lot of sci-fi. And he's also working alongside the Air Force in the adventure, and the new Air Force, the rebuilt Air Force, and his country is called the Amalgamated States. So it's basically they look at what we have today as the far past and this civilization that some people said, well, that never really existed. And he's trying to explain that it did exist, and this is what they had, and this is a republic, and he explains it, a lot of things. So it's really just that kind of story, rebuilding and hope, and good versus evil, and so it's but it's R-rated. It's a lot of sexuality in it. So
does this guy have a name?
Yeah, his name is Scheider. He has a German last name, and he's a sailor, and he interacts with the commander mostly of the submarine, also with this robot. It's kind of like a robot computer. It's an AI that runs the Senate, and he becomes friendly with the computer from Ohio, who's a senator, and basically they look at him as a leader, and he basically works alongside this commander. And he has there's a female doctor that he gets involved with, who looks after her medically, and then he runs into the bad guy. The main bad guy's you don't see the main antagonist. They talk about him in the story, but his daughter is the antagonist in the story that you see, and she's like a sea witch. She's like a sorceress, and she's really, really very, very attractive, and so they're really into each other. She's evil, but he's very attracted to her. So he runs into her, because she tricks him, and there's a series of tricks, and basically he works with this group, and he's helping them survive, and that's kind of the adventure story. So that they kind of set up.
Does it end here? Do you wrap this all up in one book?
Sure, it has a happy ending, but it doesn't end completely. There's obviously meant for more. So there's some things have cliffhangers and everything, but not completely. But it's a story of its own, but it's meant to have sequels in the story later on. If myself or someone else wants to write more of the story, into that world.
If someone else, who else would write something?
I don't know. I mean, like if it gets, I would hope that fans of sci-fi and military adventures would like it, and it would get popular, and people would want to see more of it. If I don't have the ability or time or money to write anymore, maybe somebody else can go along with it. There's other authors that might want to work with it and do some really good work on it on their own. That's happened before with other franchises. So
yeah,
I'm not really sure. I'm just going to let it go. I'm just, like I said, this is as far as I'm going. It's very expensive for me to write and edit these stories and publish them. So I'm just going to leave it at least 2 books for a while, and hope that, other fans see it and like it, and, learn about it, and hope it's well known and will receive well, and out in the public, basically.
Well, I mean, you said you were frustrated because your first book, there wasn't a lot of publicity. Do you do anything on your own?
No, I don't have. There's not very much. I just do stuff on the internet with it, and that's as much as I can do. I don't have very much money, so.
Well, I'm talking, a book signing, getting some people together that talking about your book at a library, talking about the process of writing. There's some local libraries that do that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so R-rated and so sexually explicit that I just have a real it's I have a dilemma. It's kind of, I'm reluctant. That's the word I'm trying to say, is that.
But your book is not about sex. Your book is about something much bigger. You don't.
That's true, but the material in it, you got to understand that this material in it is sexuality. I mean, it's a lot, and it's something. I would be associated with it in person. It's something that the service, there's things that you don't want them connected with, and that's kind of my issue. And I was hoping I can pay for marketing, or in the future, or somebody would market it. And I can only do so much of it as long as I work there, and I'm going to work there a while. And it's basically it's kind of, it's hard for me to say this. I'm the guy that wrote this in front of other people. That's always difficult for me.
So everything that you would do, you would have to do on the internet.
I would think so. Yes.
And yeah. Facebook.
Facebook is the biggest one, and friends see it that are interested. But that's just as far as I can go with it. Really, there's not a lot of money there. There's not a lot of time.
Right.
It's either I don't write these stories and nothing gets out there, or I do, and I really wanted to get them out there, and I paid the money, and for both of them, they're very expensive. And I really, really like this material. I just hope that there's other science fiction and military fans out there like myself. That's kind of the reason why.
Right.
And a big dissatisfaction with a lot of material that I've seen, the last 15 years.
So you're hoping you're going to fill the void. You're filling the void.
Fill the void. There's stuff that I would see years ago, and I'm not seeing it anymore. And I know the reasons why, but it's a loss for the art of science fiction and action storytelling.
Right. Maybe you could just get something going under your alias on the internet, because I know that, like you said, there's people who love the sci-fi military genre, and there's like groups of people that flock to that kind of material. And also, while you're talking, I'm thinking video game. This would be a great video
right,
game.
exactly.
Right?
Stuff like that. Some people say it is similar to a video game. Like, well, it is, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be, a novel, and then meant to be a TV show or movie. And that's kind of the thing I wanted to go with, instead of. I don't like the franchise. It's not a kids thing like Power Rangers or something. It's not Ninja Turtles.
No.
It's nothing like that. This is adults only, and so I try to really make it that way. I guess a video game series called Witcher. That's something I would compare it to.
Yes. Yeah.
That's more adults.
Right.
That's not kids stuff.
That's adults.
So.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's a book. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, and that's where it's going. And I don't play a lot of video games. I just, like I said, I go to the movies, or I read a lot of books, and when I have time, and I do see TV shows when I have time, and I just shake my head. It's so awful, some of the material.
I know.
Or some of it will go into realms that I like, and then there's real dark and ugly messages, and real violent and real nihilistic, and I'm like, what? What am I watching here?
Yeah.
Nothing enjoyable. This is not joy. This is like watching a train wreck.
Right. Well, do you get joy out of writing? And was it joyful to see that your book was published?
It is. It's just a lot of joy writing. I get these ideas, and I want to put them down. I want to come up with more morally patriotic themes in the story. That's missing, I think, in other stuff. So.
Right. Well, that's saying something, Alexander.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Finally, Matthew Hawkey is proof boredom can be a spark for creativity, which for him resulted in his book, The Intangible Tangerine.
Well, basically, I had some time off, and I was looking for something to do, and I pretty much just figured what I could do is write a book. Wasn't real sure what I was going to write it about, but I just kind of took some time, thought about it a little bit, and just kind of came up with a little fictional tale that I kind of added some stuff to. Kind of like, say, if it was a skeleton, it would be like adding, like, say, a character would be an organ or something like that. Just adding muscle and blood. Different parts of the body would kind of like form into a book. That's how I kind of tried to do it.
Have you ever written before?
No. Well, in like high school, we'd always have like different reports and different things that we'd have to do. But yeah, this is my first published work.
You just decided, I'm going to write a book.
Yeah. Actually, what I did is I went through the dictionary with my eyes closed, and I waited for I opened them as I had my finger on the page, and I went through several pages, and whenever I opened them, I was on intangible. So I started with that word, and wrote it on a piece of paper and circled it, and then did about 5 more words like that and circled those and drew arrows to each other. And then I really can't remember how I did it. It was something like that, but it came up with a completely fictional book to where I could just add stuff in the middle, but I would have to take notes and make some sort of story. So it's really like, to me, it seems like it's a very fabricated story, but it comes together pretty well.
Was the next word you landed on tangerine?
No, I'm not sure how I came up
With tangerine?
with that. Yeah, but I know it was intangible because like I used, like when I was in high school, I had a teacher and she was one of my favorite teachers, and she let me take home for the summer, probably about 30 or 40 different quizzes, like vocabulary quizzes. And I use those for like to broaden my vocabulary, and I'd read through the dictionaries and thesauruses a lot. That's what I really like to do. I don't know, it was a little bit different, but it made it easier. That way it just didn't seem like I was making something up. I had a purpose to make it up for the words that I would find.
How'd you come up with Phil the Bear?
There was a little boy that I took care of at church when I was in junior high, and he was autistic, and his name was Philip. And he would never have like his like flare-ups with me. He was a real nice little kid, and I just decided I'd name it after him, the main character.
That's so sweet. And you made him a little bear.
Yep.
And he was hibernating and couldn't find any food in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens?
Well, they meet up with a couple more animals. They're not really like indigenous animals, since it is like a fictional tale, but they meet together and they find a way to, well, they communicate with each other to try to go ahead and get food, but then they have a creature come that starts to help them, and that's when it's kind of like a fictional magical tale starts to incur, and then they go through a kind of like a little adventure to basically make their lives a little bit more plentiful, to where they can stay in the area that they're in, to make it a little bit better for them to live.
Well, tell me who Phil meets while he's looking for food.
It's Tolan the kangaroo, Terrence the tree frog, and Bob the rhinoceros. And then there's another character that's not mentioned on the back of the book or in the description, because that's when the more magical fictional tale starts. I was thinking that would be better to be left as a surprise.
Okay. When you say the magical, what makes it magical?
Well, the father of that character that I didn't mention was a wizard that had disappeared from the forest. That's why the forest is in such bad shape, is because no one had been there to care for it. So the animals, they come together, and when they meet the magical character, they get special powers to where they can help take care of the forest and help the other animals pretty much learn together, learn together and make them feel safe, to where they can go ahead and continue with their lives instead of having to worry about the forest dying.
So you've got a real message there.
Yeah, it's like I hadn't read a lot. Like I know I get environmental science magazines like Sierra Club or Nature Conservancy, like those magazines, and I donate to them. And I'll read those type of stories and books. That's why I kind of wanted to have a message to younger readers that would kind of make. I know they aren't going to think magic is actually real, but well, possibly they wouldn't think that to an extent, but it would make them feel that any extra effort or a thought of it could maybe give like a better feeling or an easier feeling on how nature can be taken care of or how it can work out. Because what I realized is that when I was younger, we look at a lot of different animals and we talk about pollution, but now it's more like the secluded forests or deserts or the different areas like Antarctica, to where we've never really been, well, people have been there, but we haven't figured everything out about it. It's like it makes it a lot more interesting, to where it's easier to learn, and it's kind of like a capability of wanting to learn a lot more easier to grasp, I guess.
Right, right. Now, are you able to go out and promote your book?
Well, I've taken a copy to the library where I live. They have a local authors area, and I have given them one of those. I sent one to my dad, and they were going to try to work it into where they could read it during group. I was also going to try to send some. I had called St. Jude, but they don't take donations that way. But I'm going to try to get my reviews done first, so I can have a little bit more to where people can, if they go look at it, like if they, I kind of see it as if the parents see that there's going to be a book signing, then it's going to be, they want to go look and see what the book's like. But really, too, the category that my book was put in was a young adult fiction and fantasy adventure. So it's really to that 14 to 17. So it's being that it's 55 pages long, I think that's why I took it up from, like, say, a children's book to a young adult, which really, if there's a younger reader that's looking for a challenge to read a little bit more and they can get a grasp on the goodness of nature, then that would be like a way to where a younger reader could read it. But I'm not really sure if I should try to do book signings. I'm still kind of getting all the websites and reviews and the different things of that nature kind of settled up, and getting those done in order, because it's new to me. I know it was it took me several years to kind of get everything put together, because I worked off and on it. I was still working then, and
What did you do when you were working?
I worked at different restaurants. I worked at a gas station for the most part of about 12 years, and I had everything done, but the one thing that I never really got a hold of was that you could self-publish. I had always thought that the only thing that I would be able to do was to get like a contract signed with Disney, or I think I had gone to Books A Million and picked up a marketplace reader's guide. I'm not sure if that's what it was called, but that kind of helped out. But then I just kind of put it on the back burner and waited. But finally, I got it all settled up and finished, and yeah, it's out there, published, has my name on it, and I'm just working on getting everything promoted now.
That's the way to do it. One step at a time. You got to keep writing.
I'm gonna see how this book does, because I have an idea to maybe write two of them, one for the good and one for the evil, and then that way it might be a little bit, or for somebody a little bit older, or actually for maybe that young adult fantasy adventure crowd again, just because it could be like a simple book to kind of get a reader excited about it, and then if I can maybe make a longer book that might be around like 150 pages that have the good aspects of how all that comes together, and then the more evil aspects of the book, how it can come together, and then have those two books. But I'm really going to have to see how this book goes first, because I'm not sure if it would be eventful for me to take the time to write those two. I know it would take a lot of time, but I have time to write them, so I might just go ahead and put them together.
All right. Well, good job. Just from picking words out of a dictionary to a published book, that's pretty good, Matthew.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you. Have a good one.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.